Thank you. Last session, last day, we made it. Yay, us. We just want to do a really quick introduction of who we are, and we pulled up some vintage spy pictures of ourselves. Gerol, where are you in yours?
That picture was actually taken at a classified location. No, actually it was in Italy. I was on a trip, and that was Pompeii. That's from Pompeii.
So Gerald's trying to sneak in and get some secret files from a volcano. This is my picture from my high school yearbook where I was voted most studious, and myself and the boy who also was my co-winner were pretty bitter about it, so we thought that it would be rebellious to pose with our TI-83s in James Bond style. So that was my idea of humor when I was a senior in high school. It hasn't matured that much. Anyway, here's our contact information. We're both very active on Twitter and email, so please feel free to contact us for any questions. And speaking of contacting us, I was challenged to tweet during my presentation, so it's going to happen, right? So if you have any questions, we've got a lot of stuff that we're trying to get through. We're probably not going to be able to take questions from the audience live. If we do at the end, that's great. But if you have questions during the presentation, I'm about to hit tweet. Reply to this tweet. You can search on the InstCon hashtag, and we'll try to answer them after our presentation. So tweet, bam. All right. All right, so your mission today is to learn about Canvas outcomes. The grades are not enough, but they're such a perfect place to start. We've got a couple different sections of our presentation today. We're going to start just with an overview of what we're doing today. Then we're going to have a kind of an intro dossier on student learning outcomes. They go by a lot of different aliases, a lot of different code names, and I just want to make sure that we have all of our language and expectations straight before we go into our presentation. Then we're going to spend about half to two-thirds of our presentation on how to use them in Canvas, both how to manage them, how to add them, how to edit them, how to create them, and then how to get useful data for them to help influence our instruction. And then we'll do a quick wrap-up. So in terms of your own mission objectives as participant spies, we like to set objectives, or as we call them, outcomes for our students at many levels of learning, and I've got the same thing for you, and we've kind of broken them up into two categories. So in terms of learning about student learning outcomes, I want you, the participant spies, to be able to define student learning outcomes, know when to assess them, write course-level student learning outcomes, and put your student learning outcome intel into action.
All right, so what I'm going to do right now is talk a little bit about,
this is our second half of our mission outcomes.
Yes, and that's where I will come in. Being the Canvas guy at our institution, my focus and interest is in the nuts and bolts in a lot of ways of taking the hard work, the sort of conceptual work that Erin's talking about, and implementing it, actualizing it. And helping not only faculty but also administrators to a certain extent know how to make this work and workable within Canvas. So that'll be the second set of outcomes we're working through today.
So we're going to take you through being able to manage course outcomes in Canvas, attach them to assignments, and view student progress on outcomes all within Canvas. So we're going to start out with a quick dossier on student learning outcomes. I just want to make sure that, again, we have a shared language around this. It's kind of a new field, at least in higher ed. Assessment has been around in K-12 for a very long time, and it's only in the last decade or so come into more vogue in the higher ed environment. Both Gerol and I started in a K-12 environment before we moved up to higher ed. I was a music teacher, and he taught Latin. And now we are both in higher ed, so we're kind of well-versed in the overlap and the differences between what assessment looks like at the K-12 level versus what it looks like in the higher ed level. Even though the words might be different, a lot of the concepts are the same, and they all go around wanting our students to achieve by improving our own processes. So today we're going to talk about purpose, format, and alignment of student learning outcomes. There's so many reasons to define and assess student learning outcomes. Assessment kind of gets a bad PR rap, and I feel like that's a shame, because it's really a great opportunity to talk with your colleagues in your department about what's most important for your teaching and for your students. I really think that its strength comes in providing a structure for and a basis for really deep conversations about what our students are learning, what we want them to learn, and what work we're getting back from them. And it's a really important opportunity for collegiality in that kind of a way.
And I would just, mention that as we go through our presentation today, I will occasionally interject at moments where I think that needs highlighting, and is worth calling out. So much of when you dig in and understand what assessment is aiming at, so often it is exactly the same thing that we as educators are aiming at. Not with the same language, not with the same formal terms, but fundamentally, it's not at cross purposes to what we do on a daily basis.
And I've kept geeking out over all of the keynotes during which the speakers would mention how important it is for students to be able to track their own progress and to be transparent with our students about what it is we want them to learn and why. And I think assessment and kind of focusing in on learning outcomes really helps to do this. There's a lot of different ways to write learning outcomes, but this is a good place to start if you're new at it for a course level. So this is called the SWBAT format.
Anybody in the room familiar with that acronym already?
Really?
Cool.
Oh, wow,
right.
We get to teach a new thing. That's cool. When I gave this presentation before, it didn't have a spy theme, so I made a little Batman, and I named him SWBATman, and he's like my mascot. But for this one, spies will be able to. And this is just kind of a template to start from when you're writing a learning outcome. And the reason that I like this template, it's a little bit Mad Libsy. Once you get used to it, you can, of course, vary from it and make it really what you want it to be. But what it does is it assures two things. It assures, one, by using an action verb, that your outcome is measurable. A lot of times when people start to write outcomes and they've never done it before, they use words like, students will understand a complex concept. Students will know a set amount of facts. And these are things we want, but they're really hard to measure because students aren't actively demonstrating them. So by using an action verb in your learning outcome, it really helps to make sure that your learning outcome is measurable, which will be important when we put it into Canvas. The yellow part, the condition, is really what establishes context. It might be great that we want students to be able to read musical notation, but if I am teaching a chorus class, I'm going to want them to be able to read musical notation on a choral score for their part. That's more specific about what I want students to be able to do, and since it's more specific, it helps set them up for success, to be successful, if we're really putting our learning outcomes into context in this way. I do miss SWBATman, though. The last thing I want to talk about with student learning outcomes is alignment. This can get kind of confusing, especially at higher ed institutions where there's initiatives going on at all kinds of levels, okay? So there's institutional levels, programmatic levels, and your own courses and programmatic offering level. There are equivalents in the K-12 sector as well. And they're both going to have student learning outcomes and program goals. A lot of times people will use the word outcome and goal kind of synonymously, but at least in the context of this presentation, I'm going to make a distinction. Outcomes are really based on outputs. These are things that you can observe that students can do at the end of your programming. So at the end of your course, at the end of an assignment, at the end of a unit, after graduating from your major, after graduating from an institution. The outcomes are the things we want students to be proficient in their ability to perform. Whereas goals are more input-based, right? They're just as important. They're not what we're talking about today. A lot of times part of the assessment bad rap comes from, but that's not all I want to think about. No, it's not. And these are inputs. They're experiences you want students to have. They might be a textbook that you want to use. It might be certain knowledge points you want to cover in lecture. It might be a guest speaker or a field trip. These are all goals. They're important for planning, and they're going to influence your outcomes. So your student learning outcomes should try to be aligned from all these levels, both vertically from institution, program, and course, and horizontally between your program goals, your inputs, and then your outputs, what you want to see at the end of that. So when do we want to assess our student learning outcomes? Here's a little James Bond timeline I thought was pretty cool. We're going to talk a little bit about assessment versus evaluation versus grading. Again, these are all kind of code names that can be used differently in different contexts, so I'll just talk about what it means in this setting. For Canvas learning outcomes, that's really an assessment-facing tool. We'll talk a little bit about the assessment cycle and how to choose which assignments you want to use for assessment, which again is going to be different than evaluation and grading. So here's a Venn diagram that mostly made it through a couple different saving iterations of the slideshow. But I've got assessment, evaluation, and grading, and one of the reasons that these terms are interchangeable so often is that all three are meant to provide feedback and use measurement, mostly of student work, right? So we're getting assignments from students, we're grading them, we're providing feedback. What part of that is evaluation? What part of that is assessment? And what part of that is grading? Evaluation is the scary one, okay, right? So that's the one that it addresses goals and sometimes learning outcomes, but what it really does is it makes judgments. Evaluation can sometimes be tied to, at the K-12 level, whether or not you meet a certain level of proficiency determined by your state. In terms of higher ed, evaluation is the thought process that goes into whether you're granted tenure, things like that. So it's looking at data and taking measurements to make a judgment. And it's usually summative and scheduled kind of at certain checkpoints. Assessment, on the other hand, which is what we're talking about with Canvas outcomes, is really trying to address learning and student learning specifically as relate to outcomes and skills. And its purpose isn't to make judgments, but to ask questions. Questions like, how can we improve our curriculum and instruction? Are we serving our students the way that we want them to be? What are some holes in our curriculum that we might need to work together to reinforce? What are some gaps in understanding that we need to shore up before we can move on to this next part of our curriculum? And what that really does is it tries to be student-centered, it's ongoing and it's formative, and it doesn't need to be scary. A concrete example that I like to give between assessment and evaluation is whether or not a low number is scary. It can be scary in evaluation, but in assessment, a low number is kind of gold because it tells you exactly where your leverage points are for making a high impact on your student's experience. And then grading also, to kind of talk about that as well. We'll talk a little bit when we get into Canvas about how it's a very freeing experience to kind of separate giving grades to students from assessing students' proficiency. Again, if you want to have the freedom to have a low number not be scary, it can be scary to tie it into a student's grade. It can be scary for you and for the student. So you want to give the students the opportunity to fail, to be able to make improvements without having an impact on their GPA and their life in that way. So kind of separating out the process of gathering data from assessment from gathering scores for grading can be a really freeing technique for you.
And if I can just, talk, when I get into my part, I'm also a classroom teacher at the higher ed level, in addition to the instructional design work. I also teach at my college in addition to doing academic technology and supporting faculty in course design. And what Erin just was talking about with regards to separating and combining assessment and grading, that occupies a lot of the conversations I have sometimes with faculty who are maybe thinking about starting to do some of this work in their course design, but have concerns about that connection or that lack of connection. And it is really, really interesting to see the different ways that Canvas makes possible to treat assessment and grading separately, but also to combine them where appropriate.
Because that can save you time, let's be honest. Outcomes and student learning outcomes are kind of the first step in something called the assessment cycle. This is represented linearly because the paper is shaped as a rectangle and that was the easiest way to kind of fit all of the words on the page, right? But this is kind of an infographic that I like to hand out to people on my campus. It's also on the digital handout or the paper handout. Assessment, and it basically says that assessment works best as an iterative process. There is no step one, and when you get to step 5, you're not done. You're gonna wanna go back around and around and around and making continuous improvement in your programs. But outcomes are listed as step 1 because they're a really good place to start. If you start by thinking deeply about what is important for you that students can do at the end of your program, it's really going to help drive all the other steps of your curriculum design. So really thinking deeply about what you want students to be able to do at the end of your course is a great place to start in the assessment cycle. It will then inform your curriculum, inform your instruction, inform which kind of assignments you want to use for assessment, and finally lead to reflection. A lot of times, is anyone responsible for doing assessment work on your campus? A lot of times I'll get assessment reports that kind of go through step 1 through 4, right? They'll have done all the steps, but then the part that's missing is having this really deep conversation with colleagues about how to use this data, because sometimes assessment can be seen as, this is a thing we have to do for our NEASC accreditation, so I'm going to fill out the form and I'm going to check off the box, and I wish we didn't have to do this every term. But where the gold really comes in is in the reflective part, where you talk with your colleagues about what you notice and where you brainstorm new ideas and how you want the data that you collected from students to kind of go back and re-inform your curriculum and make sure it's ever growing and ever changing.
And again, this is one of those moments where I sometimes will speak to my faculty colleagues and say, look, reflection. The point of assessment is that reflective conversation and engagement. That's what you do. That's what you already do. We're just talking about it in these terms. We're on the same page.
All right, so choosing assignments for assessment. You probably give a ton of different assignments in your classes over the course of a term. Almost all of them are probably going to factor into your grades, but not all of them need to factor into your assessment. Again, this is those portions of your assignments that actually focus on measuring student proficiency in a skill. As many different assignments there are, that's as many different ways that you can try to measure your student learning outcomes. So one tip that I like to give people is to let the outcome itself guide your assessment process, your mission protocol. There's kind of 2 main categories of outcomes. There's process-based and there's product-based. A process-based outcome is going to be something that is a process you want students to learn over a period of time. This is something you're going to measure multiple times, not just once. The assignments don't have to be big tests. A lot of times people think that assessment assignments need to be huge tests or projects, but they don't. This could be something like a blog or an iterative writing assignment.
So for instance, one of the courses that I teach regularly is an introductory philosophy course at our college. And one of this type of assignment that I do on a regular basis is a very brief 1-page weekly writing assignment. And the format of it is very structured. I give students that. But the goal of the writing assignment is over the course of the entire semester to see their growth and their ability to write in a specific analytical kind of way.
And again, you may be measuring growth rather than achievement if your outcome is process-based. If it's product-based, this really is going to be measured 1 or maybe a few or maybe many times, but it's going to be looking at something that the students create, and it is going to be based on how well they did at creating that product. Assignments will probably be higher stakes if your outcome is product-based, so it might, again, be that big research paper or that big project or a concert at the end of the term. And then you will measure the quality of the product rather than just measuring growth. All right, so we are now into the part where we talk about how to do all this in Canvas now that we've got our language down. So yay,
Huzzah.
Canvas!
Cool, I think that's my cue.
I think so.
All right, so we're going to talk about several different approaches. Thank you. We're going to talk about creating custom outcomes, right? So sometimes you, as a classroom instructor, are going to be in a position to be creating your own fresh outcomes for your specific course. Sometimes you're going to be in a position to need to import existing outcomes from an account level or a sub-account level. And we're also going to talk about, again, the importance of incorporating the syllabus into this process as well. Okay, so within your course space, and is this the time we're going to do this? Mm-hmm. Yes, all right, so we're going to hop over to a live demo course. Many thanks to the Fine Tech folk for getting us set up with connectivity, yes. Outcomes in your course navigation menu is there for you. Click into Outcomes, and to add a new outcome.
Well, hold on. First, I want to talk really quickly about outcomes groups. Your outcomes are managed kind of the same way as a file would be, right? And this just make them easier to find. So here's a group that, this is for a fake but populated with fake students. Chorus class, that's my background, is teaching chorus. So I've got two different groups here. I've got chorus, ones for just this class, and fine and performing arts. Those are ones that are for my department, my fine and performing arts department. So within chorus, I'm going to go in there, and now.
And so here, Erin has created several outcomes already, but she's going to step through and create a brand new one here for us by clicking the plus outcome button.
All right, so we're going to create a new outcome. There's two different names, which is kind of interesting. The name this outcome is the one that you are going to see, and the friendly name is the one that students are going to see. So whatever you do for name this outcome, do it in a way that is going to be easy to keep records later, maybe sort by number. So I'm going to call it Chorus Outcome 5.
And let me just say, your institutional data people will thank you for this kind of forethought.
Yep. Reading music. So I want to measure students' proficiency in being able to read music. For friendly name, this is what students are going to see when you add it to assignments. So I don't want, they're going to be like, Co5, what is that? Is it worth 5 points? They're not going to know. So I'm going to name it Reading Music. It also shows up on the little menu with the friendly name. All right, then you've got a rich text editor. You can put as much detail as you want. I'm just going to say students will be able to read music on their choral score. Pretty simple.
All right, so scrolling down there, now we're taking a look at the scale.
So this is what's going to kind of import into a rubric. So you can change this if you'd like to. I'm not going to right now. But all of these things are fully editable by clicking on the pencil. You hit Mastery At. You can decide what this is. For this one right now, it's labeled Meet Expectations, and it's worth 3 points. So for now, I'm just going to leave it at 3. You can set it wherever you want. Calculation method, there's a bit of choice here too. So you can do a decaying average, which is an average, but it weights more recent assignments heavily. N number of times, that might mean that you have to score proficient at least 3 times, and you can set that. Most recent score or highest score. So maybe it's important to you that students can do this with mastery 1 time, and that's all that's really important to you. That's when you would pick highest score. I like to do decaying average just kind of as a default, because it's a happy medium between recency and multiple measurements. All right, and then if you click decaying average, this is just how much weight you do for the last item. So I've got it being worth 65% of the calculation. So I'm going to do save. Creation successful. Woo!
Yay.
You can edit, move, or delete, but now you can see there it is, reading music outcome right in my chorus class.
So I don't know, if maybe now is the right time to mention the caveat about creating outcomes in your course. So the caveat being, once an outcome is in use in
Once
your
it
course,
has been graded as a part of student assignment,
then it is there forever. So
you can see I've got 2 different right now, reflect on individual performance in rehearsals. That was because in my last demo of this, I created a duplicate one, and then I graded both of them, and it says, this outcome has been used to assess a student and cannot be edited or deleted. I think not once it's been tied to a student. So that's why it's a good...
within the course.
Yeah.
So I think it's analogous perhaps to if you've ever encountered the situation where you've created an assignment, students have submitted work to that assignment. Once students have submitted work, yeah.
So not only is backward design like a good pedagogical model of thinking about what you want your outcomes to be before you actually start doing your assignments and things like that, it's a good idea for Canvas's programming quirks as well.
All right, so we've just stepped through the process of creating your own outcome in your course. Can we take your question?
So the question was, you can modify outcomes, so how do you get around that once you've already graded them? Yes, you can create new ones. You won't be able to put the data from the 2 slightly different ones on the same line, but you can merge them in a report or something. And the other thing is that you can edit them now. For the one that I just created, you can still edit it because there's no data yet. So if you just made a typo or something, that's fine, you can edit it. I am going to ask people, I'm sorry, to hold off on questions just because I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. Hopefully we will have time at the end. The next thing we're going to show is how to import existing assignment or existing outcomes. So we talked about aligning with your program or institutional learning outcomes, and one thing your Canvas administrator can do for you, or if you're like me, you can ask for permissions to do it yourself, but that's crazy, don't do that. Is you can set up in Canvas a bank of outcomes that people can then import into their courses.
Yes. So, and we can talk with folks, administrative type folks afterwards if that's something you're interested in looking in further. For right now, we're just going to demo. There are already existing outcomes at the account level we're going to bring into a course. So we've got the Find button up there, and again, we're still in that outcome space in your course. So if you click Find, now you can sort of see on the left column there, but it's account standards. And there are some manually created, and then there are your institution. So we are Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts.
The manually created ones are for everybody, and if you are K-12, I believe that the Common Core standards are all in there already. Like, they're just part of Canvas, I think. I could be wrong, but that's cool if it's true. I might be lying. Anyway, we put in some. So I'm going to pretend that Chorus is part of our core gen ed in the creative arts domain, and Chorus really focuses on personal encounters with art. So I'm going to click it, I'm going to preview it, make sure this is the one that I want. Sure, yeah, that looks good. And I'm going to import it into my course. Yes, I would like to do that, thank you. So now I'm back in my course, I'm in Fine and Performing Arts, and you can see that this one that I imported is in there now, and I can attach it to assignments.
So once it's imported, it's available to attach to assignments. So let's go there. So I think the next thing we want to look at is what it looks like.
Here. So we did that. Yeah. Our slides are available online. There's a bit.ly link in our digital handout. Importing, we did that. Oh, don't forget the syllabus. All right, so one thing I want to say is that don't get caught up in the trap of once you've set this all up in Canvas thinking that students are going to happen to find it. They might, and that would be cool, but really when it comes to learning outcomes, the whole point of them is that they are what you personally have decided are the most crucial parts of your class. You're going to want to tell students over and over again, these are the most crucial parts of my class, both on the program level and for my class level, because that will help them succeed. They'll be able to put their assignments into context, they'll be able to know why they're doing what you're asking them to do. So in addition to doing all this stuff in Canvas, put it on the syllabus, put it at the top of your assignments, do whatever you can to make it transparent to students why they are learning what you're asking them to learn. And that practice of transparency in that kind of way has been correlated in studies from UNLV with student retention, student success, and while it helps all students, it has a higher effect size for traditionally marginalized students, such as students of color and students from low economic backgrounds. So doing these things is not just busy work for your assessment people, it also helps promote equity, which I think is something we always need more of in this world. All right, yes, we are here now.
Huzzah. Okay, so back to the nuts and bolts Canvas stuff. I'm sure I don't have to spend a lot of time talking to you about how to create assignments, but in case you've never done this particular step, once you've got an assignment, we'll see what it looks like to attach one of these newly imported outcomes into that. So let's choose core assessment. Excellent. So we've got a pre-existing core assessment assignment already built. Now, if you scroll down below, as we're doing right now, you've got the plus rubric button. And again, you may have very well already gotten very comfortable using that to build your own personal rubrics at the course level. But once you create a new rubric, rather than building it out, Erin is going to demo the lovely Find Outcome link, which may have been hiding there in plain sight the whole time. But that's where we're focusing, the Find Outcome button within that rubric creation.
So you click Find Outcome, and since this is a core assignment, I want to attach my core learning outcome, which is coded as CCCA2 in this particular thing. It pops up, I can preview it, and then I say Import. Okay. And now you can see it makes it just be a row on the rubric. Just like any other assignment, it's graded in SpeedGrader, only now what it does is it attaches the outcome metadata to it that allows you to get mastery data later once you score it.
Data, reports, the whole 9 yards on the back end of things. And again, it's worth highlighting at this point, we have just imported one outcome into the rubric for this assignment as one row in the rubric. I may choose to go on building this rubric out further with other outcomes and or with other criteria that are specific to how I am going to grade this assignment. Right? So my rubric may end up being a mixture of outcomes rows and non-outcomes rows.
If you want to make it a mixture, you're going to want to make sure you click this button that says use this rubric for assignment grading. That will connect it in SpeedGrader, and it will actually make these 4 points count towards the 4 points in your assignment. If you want it to be completely independent of the grade, you can do that too. And leave this box unchecked. You can still score this in SpeedGrader. It will still give you the data about the outcome, but then you can just put in your own grade based on whatever criteria you want, and that makes them completely separate processes, but you get data from both by looking at the same assignment.
So for instructional design folk in the room, let me share that side of my experience. This is often the moment where I end up going into a really interesting conversation with faculty I'm working with about that issue we talked about earlier, the overlaps and the disconnects between assessment and grading. And building this rubric that may or may not have assessments and other criteria together is really a great opportunity there. I'm so sorry, I'm going to respect Erin's desire to keep it rolling.
How are we doing on time? I can't, it's too bright to see the signs. How are we doing on time?
8
All
minutes.
right, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we're going to stick around afterwards.
Yeah, we will. All right, so
all right.
we attached via a rubric.
So
That's
ordinary
what that
assignments,
looks like.
great.
You can find them. I'm not going to demo this in Canvas, but up at the top of the rubric, if you have imported rubrics, your Canvas admin can import rubrics that are tagged to outcomes. You can do that by clicking on the Finding a Rubric. The other way to attach outcomes to a assignment is by using question banks. This is about to be kind of obsolete once Quizzes Next comes out, but in a good way, right? The principles are all the same, but Quizzes Next is going to make this much, much, much more flexible. As of right now, you can see my red caveat. Only one outcome can be used per question bank, so I like to organize my question banks by learning outcome. It's a good way to do it, to kind of keep everything organized and to remind yourself that only one outcome can be used per question bank and all the questions in that are tagged to that outcome. Starting with Quizzes Next, you're going to be able to attach one or many outcomes to a bank or an individual question. So you're going to kind of do mostly the same steps, but it's going to be much more flexible, and I'm very excited about this. This is the #1 complaint from faculty about why they are hesitant to use this sometimes.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about the front end of building in these connections. So now we're going to talk about what do we get out of all this work, right? So
this is the Learning Mastery Gradebook, which is really well hidden in Canvas, which is a shame because it's so cool. The Learning Mastery Gradebook is a different view of the gradebook that instead of looking at grades, looks at outcome data. And it's really pretty also. So we're going to just show you in Canvas how to enable that.
So again, in your course settings, you may have poked around in here if you're a course instructor. You may or may not have ever gone over to the Feature Options tab within settings. And it is one of these toggles that's available there. There you see Learning Mastery Gradebook and Student Learning Mastery Gradebook. Really cool that you've got a view for faculty and a view for students. We're going to be focusing today on the faculty view.
But students can see this information too if you choose to let them, and you'll have to show them that. All right, so once we get to the gradebook,
then the newly activated Learning Mastery Gradebook is available through grades as per usual.
So this is what it usually looks like. This is the grades and the averages and the scores. Up here at the top now there's a toggle and you can click on Learning Mastery. So here's our fake students. Oh, it's very far zoomed in. All right, now you can see a little bit more. So here you have all of the outcomes that you've put in your class. So these are the ones that you've created yourself, the ones that you've imported from other sources, and they're all up at the top. You can calculate a bunch of different ways. You can do average, median, or mode. I usually like to do average. And it's color-coded at exceeds mastery, meets mastery, near mastery, and well below mastery. When you created the outcomes again, you set the threshold for what mastery meant. Most of mine are 3 out of 5, means mastery as defined. 5, thank you. Mastery as defined by the level of proficiency you want students to have to be successful at the next step after your course. So if you are a gateway course into a higher level of study, what is the level of proficiency they will need in a certain learning outcome in order to be successful at the next level? That's what mastery means. It doesn't mean you got 100. It means you know enough to be successful. So you can see up here, if you scroll across, these are all the different ones. You can hover over them to see what the full thing is. And it also gets kind of a data breakdown of how your students are scoring on individual assignments. So you can see in public performance and exhibition, which might be tagged to something like a concert or a performance, more than half of the students are exemplary, and 83% total are either proficient or exemplary. So most of the students in your class are ready to succeed at the next level. That's pretty cool. If you scroll across the top, you can kind of see, can you? Go away. How do you scroll?
Now you've got the scroll bar down below.
All right, so you can see, students are being pretty successful in your course, but there's one here that's yellow. Uh-oh, you don't want a yellow. So you can see easily as a teacher, this is an area, expertise in music, that you might want to try to shore up, maybe from kind of reteach or something like that. And it's kind of easy to see at a glance what areas of your curriculum you might want to try to focus on, or what's already really a strength. So that gets you a lot of information at the class level. You can also see each individual student. This, again, calculates their proficiency. So maybe Minerva comes in after class one day and she says, I really like chorus and I'm feeling pretty successful, but I feel like I'm struggling in some ways. Can you help me have some exercises that I can do to catch up to my peers? And you can look and see, all right, well, Minerva, you're actually really strong almost all the way across the board, but on part accuracy, you need some help. So maybe just practicing your part at home or with a friend would be a way to improve. So this is just a really visual and easy to see way of guiding conversations with your students about their own improvement, kind of reflecting for yourself on areas that you might want to focus on in your class going forward. And then when you get to talk to your department at the end of a term or whenever you have your department meetings, noticing these kinds of things, if you're all assessing the same learning outcome, can give you language to talk about patterns and what you notice, and maybe realigning your curriculum and what outcomes are assessed at what course or introduced at what course.
And I would just throw in there as something really important to note. This is showing us that the value of these assessment data are ongoing, and the value are for you, the instructional leader, and for the student, and for those conversations you're having. Yes, there's value for reporting and data collection, but that's not the focus. At least that's not my focus, and I don't think it should be the focus of the classroom instructor.
Yeah, assessment has the most value when it's used as part of a process for talking to your colleagues and improving your program. One thing that I do want to say is that right now, when you click on a student, you don't get a whole lot of useful outcomes data. But I believe this is one of the things that they're working on revamping in Quizzes Next, where when you hover over a student, similarly to when you hover over a course and get quick data, you will be able to do the same thing at a student level once Quizzes Next is released and implemented.
So stay tuned.
So stay tuned. I'm very excited by all of the developments. All right, so really quickly, we've only got a minute or two left. These are the things we talked about. We defined student learning outcomes, when to assess them, how to write them, and how to put intel into action. And we looked at Canvas to write and import student learning outcomes from a database, attach outcomes to assignments using both rubrics and quiz item banks, and then view student progress on outcomes using the Learning Mastery gradebook, which I think is one of Canvas's best hidden treasures. We're going to consider this case closed. There is a digital handout that we have a bit.ly link for.
Yeah, at the very beginning, we had a limited number of physical handouts that I distributed. If you were not sitting towards the front, you probably didn't get one. If you're interested, we do have that link that we can share with you.
You can tweet or email us or drop off a business card or something and we can email it to you. If you have a pen and paper, the link to our handout, which also includes a link to our slides, is bit.ly/2 lowercase w 3 uppercase O uppercase Q 1 uppercase K.
And thank you so much for sticking with us.
Absolutely. So it's bit.ly/2 lowercase w 3 capital O capital Q, the number 1 capital K. And feel free to email us, tweet us, come up and talk to us. We'll stick around for a few minutes. And I think we made it through all the sessions of InsCon, guys.